Quite recently, I got tired of doing that. It was literally making me sick and miserable. I was constantly depressed. I was always I have a lot of anxiety. I had habits that weren't healthy for me, and I'm like, what am I doing? I have one life, one beautiful life, and you're either going to let other people run that for you, or you're going to take ownership of your thoughts, and which is the only thing you can control.
Welcome to the Hope Warrior Project podcast, where we bring you an extra dose of hope to help you get over the humps of life. I'm Stephanie Martino.
And I'm Lydia Zuniga, and together we are bringing you real stories of hope from real people. We believe by hearing other people's stories of challenge and transformation, we can all gain some hope for ourselves.
So if you've been looking to find and hold on to hope, you're in the right place. Join us on this journey as we all become warriors of hope.
Hello and welcome. I am so excited about today's interview with the incredible Keighty McNamara. I hope I said it right. Thank you. So yeah, she is somebody that I have connected with pretty recently, but definitely sticks out to me. Your energy is very unique, and now that we've come together and learn more about each other, I can figure out why that is, and that's why I absolutely love doing this, because I'm drawn to certain people, or I'm drawn to people in general, because everybody has this history, this story, and you can feel it when you're around them, but you don't know the details. And then when you hear them, you're like, oh, that's awesome. That makes sense. And I love that. So we're excited to have her on the podcast because she has a very unique perspective on the world that I think all of us can learn a lot from, because she is African American, but was adopted into a Caucasian white family. So she had a very different upbringing from a lot of us that are obviously with our real parents, or in the same race that we were born as. But she has 4 beautiful little girls.
Thank you.
They are amazing. I love following her on Facebook because she is an incredible mom, does all these really creative things with these girls. She is a hairstylist. And like us, she has a podcast of her own. So she's definitely into, reflecting on life. And we are all about that, learning every day. So we knew she'd be perfect for the show. And her biggest challenge, that, as you can imagine, like what we're going to be talking about most today, is being raised in a white family. So let's just jump right into it. Thank you so much, Keighty, for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. So.
Oh, thank you. And, Lydia was talking about your little girls. I do believe I've done face painting on all of them.
Yes, you did. You did. Yeah.
They were so cute. Yeah. I had to do one cheek and then I had to do the other cheek. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Very cute little girls.
Thank you.
So really an interesting topic. And I think one that, as Lydia said, you have a really unique perspective on life. And so just kind of help us understand a little bit more. What was it like for you, being adopted into a family that wasn't the same color as you, wasn't the same race? How was that for you?
You know what? I love my parents. I feel like there's a big contrast. I really loved my family. I had a happy childhood. And it's funny because I think we had talked about knowing whether or not I was adopted. And initially I knew that there was a difference, but no, I didn't think it was any different. It's just, that was my mom and my dad. And it wasn't until, I would be in Girl Scouts or something, and I'd introduce them and they'd be like, that's your mom? And I'm like, yeah, that's my mom. Even though we don't look alike. I don't know. I had mostly white friends growing up. And even that to me wasn't super jarring. It's just kind of how it was. And then growing up and, being able to recognize the different social communities, that's when things started to become a little bit more aware, like, there's a difference here, obviously, within culture and fashion, hair. So, um,
You mentioned, when you were little, like not realizing, not even thinking about it, that,
yeah,
you know, and I think that's so true. I've seen so many like different pictures, they'll show pictures of little kids that they don't, whether it's a race different from them, maybe a child that has a disability or whatever, anything different from them when they're little,
yeah,
they don't, it's like it's a fine. And it's too
yeah,
bad that we grow out of that, unfortunately. The things to grow out of, that's something
yeah,
that shouldn't grow
it
out
is.
of.
Yeah, well, because I
It
think
is.
we're just born like naturally like being drawn to other humans maybe, and then like by looking at what society is telling us, that's when we start to get confused. And then we're like, oh, it like there's a separation here. And that's, I think that's more learned. And the more like natural thing is to just be like, this is another human being and I'm a human being. And like, so, I don't know, maybe not, but
Yeah, like it was, I guess until you've become an older kid, maybe like middle school, that's kind of what, or like sixth grade, that's kind of when kids start getting a little mean. But younger kids, kindergarten and stuff like that, you don't, that's not what you're thinking about. You're thinking about snack time and colors.
Right.
You're not thinking about, it never occurred to me to dislike somebody because of they were different. It just was.
and that's probably also like a testament to how you were raised and your parents. Because
Yeah.
because I think that I do see it in younger kids too, and it makes me sad, but that's probably because that's something that they see in their parents, or they see in their community. um so I mean, I think it could happen pretty early, but it's just what they're exposed to.
Yeah.
So that's great that it took a while.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, I remember a specific time. I was very small. I was like in kindergarten, but there's this guy out, and he had to be in sixth grade because he was an older kid, and he had gotten in trouble for something. And the bus driver was like, "You need to come up here," because I was in the front seat. "You need to sit up in the front of the bus." And I just will never forget, he's like, "I'm not going to sit next to this N-word." And I was 6, I was 5 or 6. And here I'm like, I don't know, what did I do? Like, what?
Right.
I didn't know that, but he was clearly on that way out of where he was raised to know that
Right.
people are different.
Wow.
We don't like different people. So that's unfortunate.
It is.
But
I mean, kids are already too cruel at that age.
right, yeah.
And then just to, add more fuel to their fire. Yeah, that's unfortunate. When we talked before, kind of prepping for this, you also mentioned something about, like, where do I fit in? Like being like too white for the Black community or too Black for the
Yeah.
white community.
Right.
How was that? That had been difficult.
It was really difficult because I was raised on things that a lot of, from what I would say, white culture, like, you know, and so I couldn't really relate to, like, music wise, unless you knew that somebody liked, another Black person liked these bands, for instance. You really I couldn't talk to anybody. I didn't experience the foods that are huge in African American or Black culture. Um, Hair was the biggest thing. And maybe that's why subconsciously I somehow became a hairstylist, because
Totally.
in the Black community, hair, especially for women, is huge. Growing up, back in slave days, it was important for us to look good because we didn't want to look like this thing that, like, racist people thought that we were. So we wanted to keep ourselves looking nice. We wanted to have braids to show, like, that was our crown, for instance. And so growing up in a white family, my mom, obviously she didn't know how to take care of Black hair. And how would you, if you didn't grow up in that household? So I just even remember being a small child and my mom taking me to a Black hair salon, and they were like, "What are you doing? You need to take care of her hair." And she's like, "I didn't know." And one time she even left in tears because she felt so bad. So I would always walk around with messy hair all the time. And that was a big no-no. Like back in the 90s, to get a relaxer, straightened your hair. And if you had natural hair, which now it's embraced, which I think is hilarious, but back then when I was a kid, you didn't ever let your roots grow out. You didn't. And I would get made fun of that all the time. And it's like, you don't understand. Like, I don't have the same upbringing as you. I don't have the same tools to have the cool hairstyles or, whatever's in fashion. But that was always a struggle. So it was hard making a lot of Black friends.
Yeah.
It was mostly made fun of for not being Black enough. That's how I felt. And I've heard this conversation with other Black women too, or Black people.
Mm-hmm. And did that, I mean, I guess we'll probably get into this maybe a little bit more, but I would imagine, having that feeling of not fitting in, and yours, you have the specific situation, but I think a lot of us especially in our teenage years, we have this like, I don't fit in or whatever, but how that can then like live with us as we go into our adult life, and how much it shapes how we act, how we display who we are, or how we try to show something else.
Mm-hmm.
How did that kind of happen for you? How did that affect your life?
On the other side of that, unfortunately, there were people in my adoptive family who had voiced extreme negative opinions about the Black community, racist ideas, and this person was abusive to other people in the family. They would tell me things, stereotypical things also about Black people. So here I am with that information, and it wasn't my parents, but here I am with that information there, and then having this also, not being able to fit in to the Black community as a kid or a tween. So it's like those two things coupled together. It's like, it almost made me hold on to what was familiar, which happened to be white culture. And on top of having to educate myself on Black culture. So it also made me feel like resentful and bitter almost. And I even hated that, like that I had to feel this way. I'm trying to think of how it made me feel. Like, I don't know. I just felt, I was very sad too. I felt lonely in a way, isolated from my community. And I felt that way also now. It wasn't until, I guess, recently with COVID and everything, where I switched salons, because I'm like, I have to be with my own community. I have to, not even so much as stepping away from the white community, because I hate that there's even that divide. And I try not to even think like that. But it is different when you have no ties to, I feel like everybody wants to feel like they belong, or whether you're Irish and you want to know more of your heritage. It's just kind of like that. It wasn't so much of a skin color issue. It's just, they're important people in history, music, movies. Like, there's just a thing I didn't have that I wanted. So I ended up just feeling kind of isolated, alone, guilty.
Guilty for what? Like, what was the guilt?
That I wasn't doing more. I felt like there's more that I had to learn, and that I wasn't actively finding Black people to hang out with, when I was afraid of what they would think of me. And I still kind of worry about that too. Like, even moving to the salon, they're wonderful people. They've embraced me. They're helping me further my skills in Black hair, braiding. So I'm very thankful. That's pretty much the Black family that I have. Obviously I have my biological family, but there's still a lot of fear that I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about sometimes, like as far as movies and music, because I didn't have that. I didn't have that. I know more about white history than black history growing up, and that's something I felt guilty about because I should know. Um,
So, like, I'm gonna stop you right there because I heard you say the word should.
Yeah.
Is that what you went like? Like, so that has almost become like a swear word for me.
Yeah.
Because, and I actually just finished a book that she said that her therapist wouldn't allow her to say that word in therapy because there's so much that comes with that is negative and like hurts you.
Yeah.
And so while you were talking, I was actually thinking about that. And then you said it. So it was just so funny. It was just worked out perfectly because I feel like I'm hearing, that you obviously know that you're not white. And you come from this family and it's a part of who you are, but then you're in this white family. And then maybe it sounds like there was somebody in your life that was maybe whispering in your ear that you shouldn't identify with that culture because of like what they thought of that culture, right? So like there's that inner battle of like what you should or shouldn't do and then who you truly are and who God created you as. And there's like that conflict that like is so hard. It's so hard because like you said, we want to fit in. And when we're growing up, that's the only way we know if we fit in or not is by what people are telling us we should or shouldn't do. And sometimes it's not good people that are telling it. Sometimes it's children. Actually, most of the time I feel like it's children, right? Like in school, we're going to children to be validated. Like,
right.
Is my outfit okay? Like I see it in my daughter. I'm sure you see it in your daughters. Like, like, does this match? Like, are people going to like this? And I'm always like, who cares?
Yeah.
You're a kid. Who cares? But like, you care when you're a kid because that's how our brains work, right? It's that like adolescent thinking of what's going to get the best response out of people, what's going to get me accepted, what's going to get me, to be inside, inside the group and not isolated by myself. So then when we're in this stage of life, like then we have the work of like totally unlearning the shoulds that didn't connect, that didn't align with who we actually are. And so it sounds like that's what you're doing. And so when you do go to the African American community and want to learn about it, you're probably like internally still battling with like, should I or shouldn't I? And then or I should know more, or I should be doing more. But really it's like just being curious. That's all that matters, just being curious. And that's something I'm trying to remind myself every day. Just keep asking questions because and asking questions of yourself. You can ask other people for ideas and inspiration and stuff, but like not relying on what other people's opinions of what you should or shouldn't be doing.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying because that's actually a great that what you said there is it took until now to kind of start letting go of that, and it's very difficult, but it's like either I'm going to constantly walk on eggshells worrying about what other people are thinking of me, which I don't have operation of their mind. They might not be thinking of that at all. And I'm just thinking that people, I don't know. So I'm trying now, I just hit 35. Like, I'm like, this is where I'm not doing that anymore. And like saying the should thing, you're totally right about that. I have a sweet friend named Michelle, and she's going through this, like life coaching course. And she's actually brought that up to me before, like, that's not a good
swear word. Don't say it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So how is that, like, what is this new mindset shift, I guess? Because you said like it wasn't till like recently that you're really like looking at this. So I remember you bringing up the last time we talked, like this idea of like thoughts becoming things. And And I can really relate to that. So you want to talk a little bit more about that and kind of how you are doing the work to make that change? Like, what are you actually putting into practice?
Yeah. So the I would say the thing that really the kicked me off was the George Floyd. Um, I was really affected by that, and I was really, really, really hurt. I mean, it literally brought me to tears, and I'm like, and that's kind of the thing that helped me like fast track to learning more and doing more and reaching out with the Black community and being more together and and this the pandemic, like I feel like there's never been a time that you have been made to face your thoughts. And I think that's kind of what this thing has been about. I don't know, but it's kind of like God or whoever hit the pause button is like, no, you all need to have a timeout and think about how you're being to each other, putting things into perspective of what's really important. And I had to do a lot of thinking about, and another thing that's kind of come up from this is constantly I've had a lot of wonderful white friends, but there's some people that weren't wonderful. And I always remember having to do my best to fit in so that I was accepted. Um, and so a lot of that had to link in with people pleasing, doing things and being in a way that I didn't necessarily, that wasn't me. It's just how I felt like I had to survive, I guess. And it quite recently, I got tired of doing that. It was literally making me sick and miserable. I was constantly depressed. I was always I have a lot of anxiety. I had habits that weren't healthy for me. And I'm like, what am I doing? I have one life, one beautiful life, and you're either going to let other people run that for you, or you're going to take ownership of your thoughts and which is the only thing you can control. You can't control if people don't like you because you're black, white, brown, purple. You can't control that, but you can control your inner space. And I didn't want to rent any more real estate to people in here. um it was I wanted to take that back and start thinking about how to provide for myself, because then I can provide to my family better. I can show up better in my community for my friends. And it just took a lot of self-reflection, a lot of walks with my dog, especially in the beginning of the pandemic when that's all you could do.
Nice.
And I would literally walk for hours thinking or driving to when the lockdown first happened. I would literally get in my car and drive to St. Charles, to Hampshire, listening to music and just thinking about things. And which is a good therapy. I recommend it. Put on some good music and just drive. But I was able to sit and kind of mind through these really painful experiences on both communities' sides, like just things that I had experienced, and decide if that was worth me being miserable and making peace and forgiving, which is hard.
Yeah. And as you're talking and you were even reflecting on your childhood too. I mean, I guess one thing I want to say, to people listening, like not everybody has your specific experience, right?
But
I was born into a white family with my real parents. I don't have your experience, but I have the experience of when I was a child in elementary and junior high and high school, being made fun of because I was a Christian. And some of the things that I didn't do because, well, first of all, I wasn't allowed.
yeah.
But also just because of my own, as I grew up, the moral beliefs, that I held.
Yeah.
And so, I experienced that not fitting in as well. My situation is different. So I just want to bring that to light because, I don't want someone to say, well, that's not my experience. This isn't, I can't get
Right.
anything from this. Wrong, right? We've all been through situations in our life where we have felt those feelings. I would imagine if
Yeah.
somebody's not ever felt like they don't fit in, can you please call us and tell us? Because
Right.
I want to talk to you. Right. But I think we've all had this experience in some way or another, maybe different, severities or, whatever. But there's this idea of what we feel internally, and we are individuals, and this idea of, well, I have to act this way to fit in with this group or to be accepted. And that is just so prevalent, I think, in our society, probably in the world for the most part. I don't know, maybe there are some areas that's not a problem, but I'm thinking about that because I'm trying to relate, to what you're saying. What can I learn from your experience? And so I'm thinking about how this applies to my own life. So I just wanted to mention that, because I think there's definitely some connection that we can make with everyone's story. There's something there.
Absolutely. And I want that as well. Like, I know this is completely, unique scenario. But even if it can inspire somebody to just believe in your choices, I've really become very strongly in the way of like trusting yourself, like what's best for you, and it's hard to go against the grain or being who you are. And I've like you, I've been made fun of a lot, and it's like it's so hurtful, and it's easy to push that stuff down. But I would say if you can sit with uncomfortable ideas, because they don't go away unless you actually sit and be with these things and make peace with them the best way that you can. And it's not just a one quick fix, but I've had a lot of time to mull certain things over, where now I'm in a place where it's like, okay, like I've done therapy, and which has helped a lot. And if that's your thing, do it, like whatever it takes to bring peace to you. Because then, whoever's listening, because, then you can give it to others, and especially to yourself.
Exactly.
Like just reflecting over your life and like the things that happen and all the shoulds that were thrown at you, and then deciding which ones like you actually want to hold on to, because I'm sure there were some that were good, right? There were
Yeah,
some that your parents said,
absolutely.
you should be a good person, you should always tell the truth. Like, yeah, those things, hold on to them. But then like going through and finding the ones that don't feel good and releasing them,
Yeah.
like forgiving whoever it was that put it in your brain, and then just letting it go, and then having a better understanding of who you actually are. Because I think that's, for me personally, like that's where a lot of like anxiety comes in, is like figuring that out, because I want to show up as my authentic self, but then I doubt myself because of all of the shoulds that are like floating around in my brain that I haven't worked through yet. And it's probably a lifelong process.
Yeah.
And but like I think the first step is, like you said, like reflecting on it and giving it that space, because it doesn't go away. And
Right.
if it doesn't show up in anxiety, it'll show up in other ways, in maybe like physical, diseases and stuff like that. Like everything will find its way to like,
It does. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I'm trying to do also is getting back to a healthy weight. And it's also in sitting with, a lot of these have, unfortunately, my mom, growing up, she was on the heavier side. And, even in her family, there was a lot of sadness there, and like even depression, and it's funny, the things that affect you even though you're not biologically somebody's kid. Because I feel like I've taken on, especially with the years having 4 kids, like dealing with things like emotional eating. And now I'm that's another thing that's I'm trying to do is take care of myself physically. Like you said, it's like once you start healing up here, everything else is like reciprocal, and like you start healing in other places. So now like I don't have to eat like all at one sitting. I can stop and think about, am I full right now? Am I if I'm snacking, am I eating because I'm hungry, or am I eating because I'm sad, or am I upset? And it's like, once you start taking care of yourself mentally and cleaning house, it all reflects positively other places. You're absolutely right, Lydia. Absolutely.
So, I think you've started a podcast, well, you have a podcast where you also share some of your own,
I do.
thoughts on things.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about how you're using that and what you're doing with that.
So initially I wanted it to be something like this. I started it on a whim. I actually heard an ad for Anchor and on a one called Optimal Living Daily, which is a phenomenal podcast. If you guys haven't heard of it, it's so uplifting. They talked about Anchor and how it was free, and right then and there, I did my first episode. And I initially wanted it to be something like you guys do, where you're interviewing all these great people. And then I realized, like, I'm scared. I don't know how to talk to I don't know how to people yet. So when I can figure that out, then I'll interview other people. So then I was like, okay, well, mostly for quarantine, that kind of kicked off like a diary version, because I wasn't really being consistent, which props to you guys. You have such great consistency, because it's hard. And like, so I'm like, okay, well, if I just pick this up whenever I'm thinking, I can kill two birds. I can like do a diary and kind of suss some stuff out up here and figure that out, and also offer what I'm thinking, and maybe it'll land for somebody and somebody can grab something from there and take it with them and benefit. So it's more kind of a diary entry type show. And I honestly, whenever I'm thinking, I pick up my phone and I say stuff, and then I put it all together, and I don't even edit it that much. I mean, I go to Walmart and I talk about stuff. I go, running errands. I bring my kids on sometimes. So
Cool.
yeah, it's pretty good.
And the name of your podcast is
the Awkward Mom Podcast, AWKWYRD. So it's kind of in different spelling.
It's an awkward spelling of awkward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple of your episodes, and I just love, you're just very real, like, and I think people appreciate that these days. And, even with, this podcast, of course, we do some, prep, we talk beforehand, we have a little bit of a structure, but really we want to just keep it real. What if I think people have, when it's too scripted, it's too perfect, then it's like people can't relate.
Yeah.
So that just transparency, that, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm feeling, people can relate to that. So I think it's cool that you're doing that. And we'll make sure we add the link to that in the show notes, so people can go check it out.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's such an amazing tool for you as well, because as you're saying, you're kind of in this journey of like self-discovery and questioning things from your past, or questioning how you feel about things. And I love that you're like speaking it out and getting it out of your head, because I think that is in itself is something that people could take away from this episode, is that like when your thoughts are in your head, my therapist actually gave me this analogy, is it's like spaghetti. It's like every thought is a noodle, and like it's just it's a mess, and like our brains can't function that way. Like we can't come up with like clear, concise ideas when we're dealing with spaghetti. And so when we can either write it down on paper or speak it out, and maybe record yourself, but you don't even have to, like, just to get it out, give it some air to breathe, then you're taking one thought, it's like pulling out one noodle,
right,
and laying it out, and then another noodle and laying it out, and then it makes it so much easier to like wrap yourself around, like, how does this make me feel, this one thought, this one noodle, instead of like, but then what about this? But then what about this? And what about this? And oh, that happened. Like, it's just so confusing, and it's overwhelming. It's exhausting. And then a lot of times we get so overwhelmed that we don't want to do anything. Right?
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So by people hearing you like sift through your thoughts, then it's, relatable, but also like you're teaching people like this is how it is, and not judging thoughts when they come up too, because I think earlier you said it's like the one thing that you can control is like your mental space, but at the same time, I wanted to add that thoughts just come up too, that you don't know where they came from. And sometimes I think that people get scared by maybe things that pop up, and you think like, well, that's not me. I don't want to relate. That's not true for me, but that's okay. Like, cause our brain is just constantly firing. Like how many thoughts do you have a day? I know it's like thousands. And so we can't necessarily control what pops up, like some of the dreams we have. Like sometimes you wake up, right, and you're like, what kind of person am I? Yeah. Where did that come from?
I have weird ones all the time. Just quick one, I had a dream a couple years ago that I was talking to a talking platypus.
Oh my.
First of all, who dreams about a platypus? But then this platypus, he was looking for Linda, but he couldn't say his L's, so he was saying, where's Winda? Okay, that's a funny example, but seriously, where did that come from? So That's just other things pop in our minds as you're like, where did that come from?
And sometimes like all you need to do is just be like, that's not my truth, and release it, because your brain is like, there's fire, it's literally like firing. And sometimes it'll just take things from all over the place and it doesn't make sense. And then if we like latch onto it, then it's not healthy, right? Because then it's like another should that somebody put into our brain that was never our truth to begin with. So it's like being aware of the thoughts is the first step, is like, oh, that was a thought, taking the noodle out, and then the work of like, how do I want to respond? Yeah. Do I feel like this is something that keeps coming up that I need to figure out, or is it something that I can just release and be like, well, that was weird?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man.
Well, so obviously people could find your podcast if they wanted to check that out. Is there any other ways if somebody wanted to connect with you that they could do that if they want to continue to kind of reach out and maybe ask questions? Maybe they've had similar experience.
Yeah. So I feel like I sometimes like to say I'm a Jackie of all trades. Sometimes like I have a couple Instagrams. One is like the Awkward Mom podcast, AWKWYRD_podcast. So that's specific to the podcast. But I also have Instagram where I do more posts on some about the podcast, but I have homeschooling advice and just stuff about my family. I've been operating on that a lot more, and that's Curiosity Prism, PRYSM. And that would probably be the best place to go. They're more than welcome to go to either one, but I've been doing a lot more work on the Curiosity Prism Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Keighty, for sharing all of this with us. It's been really amazing, and I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to get to know you and your story a little bit more. But and I certainly took some things away that I either needed to be reminded of or just have come across for the first time. So thank you. And for those of you listening, we will be back next week with another episode.
Yeah. Stephanie, Lydia, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
To all you Hope Warriors out there, thank you for joining us today to hear another incredible story.
We hope that you are encouraged and are taking away something positive for your own life. If you want to hear more stories like the one today, be sure to subscribe to this podcast.
And don't forget to tell your friends about it, because we can all use some extra hope in our lives.